This week, Hillary Clinton is back, and she has some advice for women in politics. Former FBI Director James Comey says he's shocked his social media post implied violence against the sitting president. And a showdown between Megyn Kelly and Jake Tapper on Joe Biden's health and the media's unwillingness to tell that story. These stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall, and let's meet our panel. Some of the men and women behind our content here at The Lion and throughout the Herzog Foundation. We've got Michael Ryan, our executive editor. Adam Wittenberg's one of our great journalists here at The Lion, and a new addition to the Lion panel, Melissa Ohden, Herzog Podcast Network host of Life Beyond Abortion. Welcome aboard, Melissa. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And let's get right into it, folks. We had a great visit from a great man. Dr. Ben Carson was the Herzog Foundation's special guest for their American Dream Speaker Series. Michael, you were there?
I was, but I have to ask, what can you say about Dr. Ben Carson? But I'm really asking you, Chris, what can you say about Ben Carson? Because you're the one that interviewed him on stage.
You know, I have to say to you personally, I was the guy who had the privilege of asking the guy some questions. One of the most impressive public figures I've ever heard speak. I mean, he's obviously a brilliant surgeon. He did surgeries. He's accomplished things in medicine by itself, stand alone, that if he never did another thing the rest of his life, but then to go on into public service, and he talked so much about that so eloquently. Melissa, you were there in the crowd as well that evening. What was your takeaway from it?
I mean, my first hot take is probably unexpected, but I was sitting there thinking, does he have the lowest blood pressure of anybody I've ever met? I mean that in every sincere way. I have low blood pressure, and I know that it helps me in life, but I'm thinking, is that a God-given gift that helps people who are under that kind of pressure and that tedious? I mean, it was fascinating. He has such a great spirit about him. And I think that's one of those things that draws people in, is not only is he so accomplished, and, he and his wife have an incredible marriage, and right, as parents, they're just folks that I think we would all strive to be. But just his very presence is something that I think most of us would want to emulate.
Michael, the accomplishments, the resume, and we didn't even get into politics yet, but you could. I mean, we could do 2 whole shows on his professional career before politics and after.
Absolutely. He told so many great stories. He told about his very violent youth. He had a huge temper when he was a kid, and he was, growing up as a child of a single mother who was working all the time, but she was really rooted in faith and gave him that foundation. Even so, he had a temper problem, he said, and he even tried to stab another teen when he was 14. And she made him read the Bible, and he found there were a lot of verses about anger and fools, and he said, that spoke to me. And he learned that anger really comes from selfishness. And so he prayed to God to change his temper, and it worked. So his last violent outburst was at age 14. He's now 73, so that's a pretty good record. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that meeting him and listening to this guy is like meeting a tribal holy man or the Dalai Lama or maybe an American founder. It's just an amazing personality, charisma, a gentleness about him, the blood pressure, like Melissa says. And the crowd that came out of that was buzzing with excitement, illumination, and absolute gratitude for having heard him.
And Adam, the thing about this conversation was it was so wide-ranging. It went everywhere from politics to his faith to even the Maha movement, which is kind of new in our political sphere, at least in these recent years, led by RFK Jr. And I asked him if he was going to contribute to that. He says he already is. He had a lot to say about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Carson is an absolutely fascinating man, and whether you know a lot about him or want to know more, I couldn't recommend the article that The Lion ran on him any more highly. I mean, a lot of news these days is negative. A lot of it is about problems in our world. I mean, this was an actual pick-me-up. This is enjoyable to read. It'll put you in a good mood and even kind of restore your hope and buoyancy a little bit.
And we think in a few days, by the way, we will have a full and complete video of our conversation with Dr. Carson available on our Lion YouTube page. But in the meantime, we'll head to the next story of the day. Michael, the 25th Amendment and Joe Biden. We're going to, a little later in the show, talk about some of the cable news discussions surrounding Joe Biden and his, not just his mental state, but now what we've found out was a very physical ailment he was dealing with at the same time.
Yeah, excuse me. I talked about that with Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, who reminds me a lot of the Pointer Sisters because, you know, he's so shy. He's always ready with a hot quote. He told me the guy should never have been president. He did not have the wherewithal to do the job, and we were lied to about it for years. This is why we have the 25th Amendment, by the way. I said a year ago, 2 years ago, the 25th Amendment ought to be invoked. It's clear now that it probably should have been invoked from the beginning. Now we got the prostate diagnosis. And you wonder, did they cover that up? I can't believe that all this isn't a bigger deal. We had basically a president who was out to lunch for 4 years, or the better part of it. Where is the investigation? Where is the congressional commission? I can tell you that Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt wants an investigation. We can't leave it up to Jake Tapper from CNN, who writes a book now, about the cover-up that, I don't know, a lot of people think he participated in. And in fact, Jake Tapper bit more inquisitors about Biden's health than the Biden's dog bit Secret Service agents.
Adam, as a journalist, I'd have to ask you, do you believe the idea that the Biden team just put out a notion this week that they had not had any kind of testing done on his prostate since, I think they said 2014. That would be, 11 years, they said, since they had a prostate exam for Joe Biden.
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't believe it. You shouldn't believe it either.
Well, that's that. I do have to ask you all a little bit. Melissa, I'll start with you. A couple of things happened today as we record this show. The big, beautiful bill, BioWhisker, passed through the House of Representatives. It heads to the Senate. I don't know if you kind of have any 30,000-foot view thoughts of what that can mean for Americans generally, or where you think that winds up politically.
Well, first of all, I love alliteration, and I feel like I'm not the only one. I feel like you love alliteration as well. I just said that to my teenager the other day. But, I think from the standpoint of what's in that bill, I was there when we were looking at defunding Planned Parenthood. I was there on the Hill doing advocacy and march related to that. I spoke at a press conference alongside other pro-life leaders and also members of Congress. And so I love seeing that we have this in play. So I have hope. I always have hope. But obviously, I know as it heads to the Senate, that remains to be seen. But I want people to know this is where their voices still need to be heard. So we've overcome a hurdle, but it is clearly not done yet.
As Melissa said, Michael, so I understand it this morning with an interview that I did previous to this show. There is a timeline on work requirements for Medicaid. There is, as she said, they've defunded Planned Parenthood, I believe. I think I read that there is no funding for USAID in this, which is pretty remarkable, and they've made some reforms to Medicaid. So it's, for people that are not particularly happy that there weren't cuts, Marjorie Taylor Greene tells me, if you thought there were Doge cuts, that's not what this was about. It never was. I thought that an interesting admission.
Yeah, and the bill's not as conservative as a lot of people would like. It's not perfect. A lot of the conservatives in the House probably don't like it, but had to go along with it. And, the fact of the matter is a lot of conservatives out in the country believe that the Democrats, if they were doing something like this, they would have got that done a lot sooner than this. I don't know why it takes Republicans so much time and so much angst to get something like this done. And the fact of the matter is the Trump revolution may be in danger in next year's midterms without a bill like this.
Adam, also another breaking news story today, and it's already up at readline.com, and you should go to that website so that you always catch news stories like this, is the 4-4, a very unusual 4-4 tie at the Supreme Court over a subject we've talked about on this show before, and that's the Catholic charter school that was to try to start online in Oklahoma. A lower court said, nope, state funds cannot go to fund an online Catholic charter school. Supreme Court effectively affirmed that by a deadlock. Amy Coney Barrett recusing herself. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and this is exactly what you just described, Chris. It's kind of an unfortunate development because when the Supreme Court deadlocks, they don't change what the lower court did. And so the Oklahoma Supreme Court said, no, the state cannot allow or cannot fund a religious-based charter school, even though charter schools of all different ilks get funded all the time. And so because of the Supreme Court going 4-4, that decision is enforced and the school will not be allowed to open.
Can I stay with you, Adam, on the transgender law in Colorado? That the fight is on out there as well.
Yeah, folks, it's not just on in Colorado. This is a wake-up call to churches, to freedom-loving citizens, to people everywhere. The Colorado legislature just enshrined in law it is discrimination to refer to someone by a different name or a different gender than what they choose, not what's on their birth certificate, not what they were born with, what they look like. And they're making it a crime. And I believe Washington State, I just saw the news this morning, also just approved a similar bill. Folks, this is a wake-up call. The front line is everywhere, and we need to be active in fighting and raising awareness and raising our voices against these things.
Melissa, your show here at the Herzog Podcast Network, Life Beyond Abortion, I know you've explored this story in great detail. That's why I'd love to hear you tee off on this one first. A Georgia pro-life law protecting unborn baby with mom on life support. Talk to us about it.
Well, let me take a deep breath to say folks have a lot of concerns and fears and grief and, just a lot of emotions about this. So I understand that. But what I want people to recognize is this case in Georgia is not about Dobbs. It's not about Roe being overturned. It's not about Georgia pro-life laws. That's, the lie that the abortion lobby and their media is spinning. This is about the laws in Georgia about how women or men, right, who are on life support therefore are then approached. And so this is an issue. People need to look at the Georgia statutes on life-saving care. So in the case of this woman, this is not about pro-life laws. This is about the care of someone who is declared brain dead. But I want people to think as well about a couple of key points. One of them is, when you're looking at state statutes, this is about whether the fetus is viable. Realize we live in a time where babies are viable at 20 weeks, 21 weeks, 22 weeks. I've seen these kiddos as they're growing up. But I also want people to think about the fact that her own family has said that they are unsure whether they would have wanted that baby to have been terminated. So this first happened at 9 weeks. Kiddo is now, I believe, 21 weeks. They're trying to get kiddo to 32 weeks. The other thing that's being left out of this is I haven't seen anything about what this baby's father has to say, and I haven't seen the abortion industry say, what would a woman want in these circumstances? What would this mom want for her baby? So I want people to sort of put their own personal feelings aside and think really critically about what we're not hearing.
Panel, thank you. Great stuff. There's a lot to cover, so we got to take a break. And when we get back, we're going to go to some of the sights and sounds on Capitol Hill and on cable news because there was a whole lot happening this week, and we'll get the panel's reaction to that next as the Lion Week in Review rolls on. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. If you've missed any of today's show or you want to get caught up on both the stories as well as the video presentation and audio presentation, you can always catch us on YouTube and go to readlion.com. We're back with the panel, Michael, Adam, and Melissa. Ladies first, Melissa, and you're our brand new panelists. So let me bring a little Hillary Clinton back into the conversation. She surfaced this week and had this to say about you conservative ladies. Wanted your response.
What advice do you have for the first female president of the United States?
Well, first of all, don't be a handmaiden to the patriarchy. Which kind of eliminates every woman on the other side of the aisle, except for very few.
Lisa Murkowski. Liz Cheney.
Yeah, there's a few. Look, first we have to get there, and it is, obviously so much harder than it should be. If a woman runs who I think would be a good president, as I thought Kamala Harris would be, and as I knew I would be, I will support that woman.
It's funny, Melissa, the rest of the country didn't seem to agree with her, but I was very curious about the handmaiden to the patriarchy. Is that you?
No, I think she must have been talking about herself. I mean, wow, pot kettle. I do like that she used the word eliminates women on the other side of the aisle. Keyword eliminates. She supports the elimination of women like me.
Adam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's not even talk about other people that may or may not have been eliminated by the Clintons, but it's really scary, and it's sad. She gets cheers for saying these things.
Hey, what is the patriarchy? I guess you're a member of it, Michael? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a member anymore. I let my membership lapse after I heard her. I just don't understand how Hillary Clinton is a respected figure or pundit worth listening to. I mean, she was fairly well implicated in the Russia collusion hoax, wasn't she?
There is a very interesting development with Biden this week, not just related to his cognitive questions, but then, now his cancer diagnosis. And there was a discussion before we learned of the severity of his cancer. And this is kind of from point A to point B. Let's go to Van Jones this week, a Democrat and strategist who had this to say about the cognitive impairment of Joe Biden and the lengths to which everyone went to keep that from the American public. Take a listen.
First, this book is extraordinary. I don't care who you are, left, right, or otherwise. Anybody who cares about this country and about just the dynamics of power, this is the emperor's new clothes playing itself out in real time. Everybody knew, but everyone was afraid to say, except for David Axelrod for 2 years, that something was wrong here. And so, I was shocked. I love Joe Biden. I don't like him. I love him. I got a chance to work with him when I was a part of the Obama administration and loved him more every day. I was shocked to see his condition when he came out, and so was the world. And that wasn't the first time he was in that condition. The book makes it very, very clear. There are people who knew and said nothing. And that is a crime against this republic. And I think the Democrats are going to pay for a long time for being a part of what is now being revealed to be a massive cover-up.
Democrats are going to pay for a long time. I found that particularly interesting because within days, out came the diagnosis of Joe Biden's cancer, and it's quite severe. And Zeke Emanuel, of all people, on MSNBC, of all places, had this to say about that.
You believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
All right. So, Melissa, bottom line, the book, the Jake Tapper, the cognitive stuff, then the cancer stuff. Does one beget the other is my question.
None of it's a coincidence. I mean, we as a people are supposed to what? Somehow we're supposed to first be super interested in the book, and then we're supposed to feel sorry for the president and trust the media in all of it. I don't know heads or tails of that. But what I do know, Chris, is, people are expendable on the Democratic side. And this is a prime example of that. And that's what I hope comes out of this, is that people who maybe, have sat on the fence or have leaned Democrat can look at this and say, wow, who do they actually care about? And, do the ends justify the means?
Michael, I heard people say after this cancer diagnosis was released, okay, now let's be a little more gentle as we talk about the cognitive impairments. As I say, was that on purpose, do you think?
Yeah, I think that was the intent of the release. It's interesting to me that the leftist media is shocked to find out there's problems with Biden's health. Either they didn't look for the prostate problem, which they claim they didn't, or they covered it up. Either way, it's either medical malpractice or it's political malpractice.
And Adam, because you're a journalist, I thought this was a fascinating exchange between Megyn Kelly and Jake Tapper, the journalist at the center of this entire story. They had it out this week. Take a listen.
That, you are not the right messenger to bring the story about the cover-up because you helped. You allowed it, and you likely did that out of a desire to help Joe Biden and hurt Donald Trump. You didn't want to do anything that might improve Trump's chances.
I do not think that that is accurate. I do not think that that is true at all. The idea that Siobhan and Annie do their piece and we have on the co-chair of the Biden campaign is not me trying to cover for the Biden campaign. That is me putting the questions of the reporting that were made to him and saying things like, so you really haven't seen any moment? Or you would acknowledge that, wouldn't you acknowledge that he's lost a step, he's 81, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said before, if I had known then what I know now, would I have been more aggressive? Yes, of course.
How did I know and you didn't know? I'm just curious, because when I saw that Wall Street Journal report in June of 24, I scoffed at it. Okay, it's an attempt, but it's lame. Everybody on the right-wing ecosystem and the independent media ecosystem knew it was a lame attempt that only scratched the surface. We had all been discussing his serious cognitive problems for years by that point. Jake, in June of 2022, this show did a full 2-hour program on his cognitive decline.
I heard it.
It was. I know we want to pretend. I'm mentioning the Wall Street Journal as a courtesy, but those of us on this side of the aisle had been reporting in depth on his multiple problems and the obvious lies we were being told for years. For years. You really want the audience to believe you were fooled?
Adam, this is one of those things for Jake Tapper. As I understand it, they hired a crisis PR firm because the book is not selling well. So I assume that's why he ended up on the Megyn Kelly show.
Wow, yeah, desperate. This really highlights the problem in the mainstream media, and we're also seeing it in the school system, where too many people in the media or who get into education, they're on a holy crusade to implement the liberal agenda and to stand up for a political point of view. They're not there to do a nonpartisan job or to tell the truth. And so it's actually holy. It's sacrosanct. They cannot criticize, because then it's also like you pull out one pin and the whole balloon deflates. And so I think Tapper and others had this fear of I don't want to puncture. They knew Joe Biden was fragile. I don't want to puncture that balloon. I don't want to put that one little pinprick, chink in the armor. And that's helps explain this cognitive dissonance that they went through.
Everything old is new again. Since we last met, James Comey, the former director of the FBI, has surfaced again. He was walking down the beach when he saw some shells in the sand that spelled out 8647. He took a picture. He posted it on Instagram. And, now he's going on a book tour himself, explaining what it meant, what he thought it meant, what it didn't really mean. Love to get your response on the other side of this. Take a listen.
Walking on the beach, we went to the beach to prepare for this week, which was the launch of my book, and to think about the book and to prepare to answer questions about it. And we were walking back towards the road, and we saw in the sand someone had arranged shells with numbers. And Patrice, my wife, said, why would someone put an address in the sand? And I said, I don't know. And we stood over it, and I said, I think it's some kind of political message. And she said, 86, when I was a server, she did a lot of work in restaurants, meant to remove an item from the menu when you ran out of ingredients. And I said, well, to me, as a kid, it always meant to leave a place, to ditch a place. I said, that's really clever. So then she said, you should take a picture of that. And I did. And I posted it on my Instagram account and thought nothing more of it until I heard through her that people were saying it was some sort of a call for assassination, which is crazy. But I took it down.
Michael, crazy that anyone would think that.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy that an FBI director who found himself in the middle of the Russia collusion hoax wouldn't know what 86 means. Unbelievable. If he didn't understand the significance of it, why would he bother taking a photo?
Or take it down, for that matter, right? Even afterward, if that's not what he meant. Melissa?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about it. I don't want to see one more of those photos on social media, to be honest. Some of them are really funny, but I'm over it. And I'm just because I'm over the whole, the thought process of I have a new book coming out and I didn't want any attention. Gosh, I just happened to find this and just happened to post it, and no.
And Adam, ultimately, this is going on in conjunction with the Tesla burnings and fire bombings. I mean, this was a well-known slogan, was it not?
Oh, yeah. And this reflects that same double standard where we have plenty of instances of the left calling for violence and perpetuating violence in the name of political things. But then, when it's done, against the right, there's no attention to that or mostly peaceful protests.
Busy week, panel. Thanks. Great stuff. When we get back, their final thoughts as the Lion Week in Review rolls on. Welcome back. We wrap up each show with closing thoughts from our panel. Michael, we'll start with you today.
Well, I like to emphasize the story about the Colorado misgendering law, where it's now a crime. It's illegal to call somebody by their not preferred pronoun, which is unbelievable because it's compelling you to be silent about your own beliefs, and it's compelling you to speak up in the right way for someone else's beliefs, which is a really incredible thing for a law to do. Welcome to the Republic of Colorado, which is also known as Northwest Korea. This is an unbelievable infringement on First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights. I thought about driving there just to misgender somebody. I thought I could be the Rosa Parks of misgendering.
Adam.
Yeah. I just want to quickly point out there is a lawsuit filed against that bill. So if you're a person of prayer or just want to be invested in that, we will be covering the protest. I'm going to call attention quickly to an article that I wrote called Blue States Last in Educational Efficiency. You can look it up on the Lion. It has this great chart that analyzes how much states spend on education versus testing outcomes. And the answers may or may not surprise you that red states are way more efficient in how they spend the money and still produce good test results. The bottom 9 out of the top 10 states are solid blue in terms of overspending and producing lackluster results.
Melissa, your closing thoughts.
Well, actually, I think I'm gonna just jump off of what Michael was talking about. I feel like I would already be jailed in Colorado for misgendering someone. I mean, I had a circumstance recently in San Diego that flashed it into my head when you brought that up. And I think it's not only a concern, obviously, from amendment perspective, but also they're trying to shape our behavior to continue to fall in line with what they want us to do. So they want us to constantly be afraid and therefore just walk out their agenda. But the other piece I think that's really important is we look at Colorado and we have unregulated, unrestricted abortion. So it's discriminatory to call someone by the wrong pronoun there, but you could kill a baby like me up until the point of birth and leave them to die, and that's not a problem.
Melissa, thanks. It's great to have you aboard, by the way. Welcome. And catch Melissa's show, Life Beyond Abortion, at the Herzog Podcast Network. That's going to do it for all of us here at The Lion this week. Catch up on all the latest news at readlion.com, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot for listening to the show.